Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to talk about how good the new barrier skill actually is and what it could actually mean for the future of Margaret. Hagumu, can you give me my forehead cam back, please? Hagumu, come on. Okay, there you go. Jesus. So what could barrier mean for the future of Margaret Record going forward, and why is this Memoria that I've opened right here, not just for the joke, but also because this Memoria right here might actually become a really important, maybe not one of the most important Memoria going forwards. But to wind everything back just a little bit, so the new unit was released, at least by the time of making this video, Momoko and Mitama, the Siren version, and they have this new skill, Barrier. So they have it on their SE active for themselves, they have it on their Magia for themselves, on their Doppel for themselves. It gives them that effect for 5 turns and it blocks a certain amount of damage. Now the best way of thinking about this, basically the exact way of thinking about this, is that a 10,000 barrier basically acts as if for the duration of the barrier you have 10,000 more HP. Right? Just imagine you have like that much more HP for like 5 turns. Now you probably will take 10,000 damage within 5 turns, so you'll just have 10,000 more HP to spend basically. So this also means that if you, for example, have a lot of defense and you have a lot of damage cut, then your barrier will be worth more because your every single point of HP that you have is worth more because you take less damage. An enemy attack that might hit someone else for 10k damage maybe only hits you for 2k damage because you have like so much damage cut and you have so much defense, like 30,000 defense, and you might have like 80% damage cut, right? If you are really defensive, your barrier will absorb a lot more. There are some examples right here on this page exactly how it also works with how the barrier goes down and then how it disappears, how it gets refreshed. Also something to quickly bring up. If you have like a 2000 HP barrier and it gets hit by an attack that does like 3000 damage, then the barrier disappears and you take 1000 damage. Like it just subtracts that and then you take the rest as damage to your normal health. And if you, on the other hand, if you already have a barrier, let's say you have a barrier that is, for example, has a strength of 3000 HP, and then you get another barrier on top of that, like someone gives you a barrier for 5000. All it does is it takes the old barrier, it takes the new barrier, 3000 versus 5000, and it just picks the highest one to stick around. So you can't stack them on top of each other multiple times. You get like a 500,000 HP barrier. You can't do that. It will just take the highest barrier, right? Either the new barrier that you've just been buffed with is higher than what you currently have, or the old one that you already had is higher, and then that one sticks around, right? So whenever size sticks around, you can't stack this forever. Now that we know a bunch of that, and I guess there's a little bit of another caveat that it says right here. If you have a Stars event on you, for example, you are burning and you take damage from burn, that burn will actually go to your normal HP and not to your barrier HP. That is kind of sad. Now that we know all of this, and I told you guys I'm going to make an entire video about what this actually means. What does this actually mean for the game, and why did I put in the video title that this is actually probably going to make a really big impact on the meta of Margaret, specifically the Mirrors meta, because in PvE some stuff will probably still change, but we don't know how much. Right off the bat though, I need to tell you guys something. If barrier really is going to show up to be the next big cool meta thing, Momoko and Mitama are not going to be the unit to make use of that, because what we're going to talk about is what happens if you actually apply barrier, not to just the one unit itself, but to everyone. Imagine, for example, you have a unit that as the passive SE says something like, when the battle starts, give everyone a 5000 damage barrier, for example, or as an SE active, give 5000 barrier to everyone. Right? Just imagine it, like something that you could immediately snap into existence on turn 1, right? On everyone. That's the kind of unit we are talking about. Now it seems kind of likely that we're gonna get a unit like that will have something like this. We don't know how soon it's gonna be, but I assure you that at some point, even if it takes half a year, even if it takes longer than half a year, even if it's just gonna take 1 month because the next anniversary unit might be that, at some point we're going to have a unit that gives barrier to everyone. Might be the very next unit, who knows. But we're going to have a unit that can do either as an SE passive on everyone when the battle starts, or as an SE active, also available on turn 1. Now if you have a unit like that, what can you actually do with such a unit? Now, let us go. I have brought up this Memoria right here. Now I'm going to not immediately talk about this Memoria right here, but I'm going to just draw the attention to the idea now that we can abuse when we have barrier. Since barrier just stacks on top of your maximum HP, what happens is if you are at full HP, which you are at the start of a battle, in case you guys didn't know this, and you then get a barrier, let's say a barrier for 5000 HP, then while that barrier holds, you will be at maximum HP. So you'll be at maximum HP, you might get hit in the face 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. As long as that barrier is alive, you're gonna stick around at full normal HP, right? Which means that that effects like attacker while at max health or defender while at max health will stick around as long as the barrier holds. And that in itself is what makes barrier so important. You get to keep these effects even after getting hit. You don't need to rely on regenerate HP to get you back up. No, you can actually just stick around on the enemy's turn. The enemy like keeps hitting into you and you just stick around at full HP, which makes you keep those bonuses. And before I give my opinion on this Memoria right here, let's just go through some Memoria in the game that have full HP bonuses, right? So for example, we have Rest Deliciously. It gives damage cut 20% and defense up at maximum health 90%. It's an unlimited Memoria, meaning that it's a free-to-play Memoria. You might just have this even without maximum break. It still already gives you like 70% defense up at maximum health. So if you have a really strong tank that has like 15,000 defense, right? You put them on the battlefield and they're gonna start out at max HP, right? They're gonna have 70% bonus defense. With barrier, they're just gonna stick around at full HP because they're gonna have so much defense that the first attack that hits them probably won't break the barrier. Maybe even the second attack won't break the barrier. Maybe the third, fourth, or fifth attack won't break the barrier. Because that's quite a lot of fucking defense, right? I didn't do the math this time. Usually I do math on these, like I didn't do this time, because you probably will believe me that if a unit comes that has like 28,000 defense or something, that unit probably will take a lot less damage than most other units, especially on top of that, you also have damage cut. So 1/3 of your defense gets subtracted from the enemy damage at the beginning of the damage calculation. So let's say, for example, an enemy attacks you that has like 15,000 attack, right? And you have, let's just say you have, what would be a good thing to go around? Actually, the big tanks probably reach something like 30,000 with this buff, like, right? Big tanks standing on a defensive tile information with this buff. This buff alone, not even anything else, like not even counting other Memoria, not even counting the defense you get from having active Memoria on just this Memoria on a big tank standing on a defensive tile, will probably reach like 30,000 defense. So, right, there's a 15,000 attack unit, which is probably a standard unit that hits you, and you have 30,000 defense. That means it subtracts 1/3 of that, 10,000, you take 5,000 base damage, which gets reduced by damage cut 20%. Maybe if you're a tank, you have even more than that, it gets reduced maybe to like a 3,000 damage. And if you have a 5,000 HP barrier, it doesn't even break your barrier, right? And then the second hit has to break the barrier. You're already surviving an entire hit at full HP. And if you have even more defense and even more damage cut, suddenly that number goes down and down and down, and suddenly it takes not 2 hits to break the barrier, but 3, 4, 10. You don't even know how much HP, how much damage it would take to actually break through the barrier at that really high defense notes. So a really defensive more like this would actually be incredibly powerful. However, this doesn't mean that this by itself would already make barrier really good. Why? Because you're just being defensive. Just being defensive is something that a lot of characters can already do really well, like Sayaka with survive spam. That by itself does not make you powerful, okay? And there's also something to note, guys. Even if you can spam barrier really hard and just stay around at really high HP the entire time and the enemy has a really hard time killing you, if the character that is staying alive does nothing on the field, doesn't get to Magia or Doppel, doesn't do damage, has a terrible connect, terrible effects, just doesn't do anything, then the fact that they're surviving means absolutely nothing. You need to actually also have good output. So even though this Memoria is absolutely amazing at making a character stay alive, this Memoria alone won't make a character good, even if it takes multiple attacks to break their barrier with this Memoria. What else do we have? Now this next one we're going to do a lot faster. This is just the free-to-play version of this. It's in the mirror shop. Yay. I say free-to-play. This is unlimited. This is just in the mirror shop. So it's even easier to get. And you will basically get this at 4 slot guaranteed, because there's like 5 copies of this in the mirror shop that you can just get. So you can already have this if you wanted to. Amazing. Then you also have this, which is more offensive. Now we're getting into the offensive Memoria. This is the free Memoria that everyone got for just playing the last event. It gives attack at max HP 25%. Now there are already a whole bunch of Memoria that gives 25% attack up by itself without having to be at max HP, so it's not that powerful, but it also gives 25% blast damage up, right, as a bonus. So it still gives more than just a Memoria that has only 25% attack up on it. But still not that strong. However, if you want to talk about being really strong at max HP, you can't do anything else other than the Soul Strikes and Space Between Light and Dark. Because the Soul Strikes and Space Between Light and Dark is one of the most infamous Memoria in the entire game. Like when the game was still fresh, and this Memoria was released for the very first time, the Soul Strikes and Space Between Light and Dark became a hit instantly and was probably the most important Memoria for PvP instantly, because the Soul Strikes and Space Between Light and Dark is just giving you so much attack that you would just kill everything immediately. The only downside is that if you just got hit even by a small attack, the Soul Strikes and Space Between Light and Dark would break immediately, and you, even if it took just 1 damage, you wouldn't be at max HP anymore, and the effect gets lost. But with Barrier, you can stay at max health. If you take that 1 health of damage, like 250, which is the minimum we can take in a single hit. It's actually less than that because of randomness, but let's say 250. You know how many attacks it takes of 250 damage to break through a 5000 HP barrier? That's a lot. That's quite a 20. So it would take a lot of time to get through the barrier if you have a really defensive unit. So, which means that in theory, if you had 2 offensive Memoria, maybe you get like 50% attack up, right? But you have no defense. 50% attack up, but you have no defense on that unit. However, you could run this for 45% attack up, and then something like this. So you have not just 45 compared to the 50% attack up, which is, okay, it's a little bit less than you would have, but on top of that, 20% damage cut and 90% defense up. That's pretty darn great. That's actually pretty darn great. Or you double dip and you say you're going to use this, and you're going to use maybe the other sword, because this other sword right here, which is basically just the free-to-play unlimited version of sword, which has the same effects and allows you to get to 90% attack up. 90% attack up with these 2 Memoria while you're at maximum HP, and with Barrier, you're going to stick at maximum HP. Suddenly, everything is really important. Something else to notice is that you have some low rarity Memoria. Low rarity Memoria with effects like these usually are terrible. Why? Because this thing at maximum HP is 25% attack up. There's so many 4-star Memoria out there that just have 20 or 25% attack up on them without having to be at full HP. So low rarity Memoria with this effect are kind of not that great. So let's skip those. Now we're going to talk about something else. Yukika. Why did I bring up Yukika? Well, now I know people have been thinking, yeah, I know max HP, that's pretty good. But isn't there another HP threshold that might give you bonus effects? That's right, critical HP. Yes, if you're critical, which I think is 35% max HP. If you're below 35% max HP, it might be 20% actually. But if you're on low health, I think what actually decides low health, like visually, is if your character is looking hurt. Like if your character is looking like, that means that the character is at low HP, which is somewhere between 20 or 35% HP, something like that. I don't know. If your characters are at critical HP and they get a barrier, guess what? Even if they get hit, they're gonna stay at low HP. Isn't that great? They're gonna stay at low HP. So you have a character like Yukika who has like 20% attack up, another 10% attack up at critical HP. Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, wait a second, it's another 10% attack up. She gets 30% attack up when she's at critical HP and 40% defense up when she's at critical HP, which before didn't mean anything. Like the defense up didn't mean anything, because if you're on low HP and you get hit, you probably die right afterwards. So the defense up doesn't do much. But now, if you can actually survive, the defense up actually means something, right? So that's actually pretty cool to make a unit like this suddenly have more usefulness. What else is good? You have this right here. Oh, Love Kyunli Maid's Son gives also a defensive bonus, but also an attacker bonus at low HP. So if you're critical health, you get a bunch of bonuses. But we already noticed that all of the critical HP bonuses that we're going to see from now on with the next few Memoria are kind of a lot weaker than the full HP bonuses. This is just 25% attack up and 50% defense up, which is okay, but not that much. I mean, getting to low HP without dying in the first place is not actually that easy, and a lot of places won't actually happen, even if you're playing with barrier or heals or whatever. So it's a lot harder to get there, and the effects aren't even that great, which is weird, because the full HP effects are so much better, even though everyone starts at full HP, so it's trivial to actually have that. And it's also a lot easier to get back to full HP if you lose it by just getting healed, whatever. So this is actually a Memoria that is pretty alright if barrier becomes important, but even so, still not that amazing. Like, critical HP is gonna be better after this with barrier, but still not that amazing. We also have this, the game memo. It's gonna be a lot better as well. Defense up by critical health 40%. That's really nice, which is a total of 70% in low health. Still should have been more in my opinion, but it's still pretty alright. It's gonna be even more important if barrier actually becomes important. You also have this this is basically just the low rarity version of it, but it's the personal of Haruka. Haruka was already known as one of the best free-to-play characters out there for mirrors, and with this, if barrier actually becomes important, will be even more powerful. You also have first handmade chocolate right here, which is also another defense up at critical HP and defense up, which is good. And then you also have this, which is basically the same effect, but instead of it being like limited gacha memoria, it's the free-to-play version of it, which you can probably get, but even that is like not even that great. So yeah, the critical HP stuff is nice, but it's not going to be that good. So moving back to the junk house, the reason why I started this Memoria is because it's also the best Memoria. Attack up probably, because it has both. It has both the 30% attack up at max health, which is more than normal 4-star, so it's already beating every single 4-star out there for attack, aside from sword itself. But it also has 80% defense up at the same time. So instead of having to spend 2 Memoria to get both of these effects together, how about we just spend 1 Memoria and get both of these effects together? And if we actually lose the barrier and get hit slightly below max HP, right? The barrier breaks and we get hit on maybe like 97% of our health after that. We can also have to regenerate on it to get back to max HP, and then maybe throw another barrier on top of that. Isn't that amazing? So if the barrier meta actually ever happens, this right here might become one of the most important Memoria in the entire game, which is funny, because it's limited and no one rolled for this, because Tsuruno no Felicia was one of the least rolled limited gachas that the game has ever seen, mostly because Tsuruno no Felicia are not actually that popular in JP. Alicari is the most popular ship by sheer volume of fan art in the entire game, and they aren't even promoted. Every single piece of promotion for the game promotes Iroyachi, but nothing promotes Alicari, and still they're the most... Whatever, I'm getting sidetracked here. Anyway, point is, not that many people have this Memoria, even though it might actually become really fucking important if barrier becomes important. Now, let me talk about some other aspects about barrier, now that I've given you the most important stuff. So, something to know about the barriers. Some people have asked this. Doesn't Tokanemu, like just in general, doesn't dispel granted status effects? Like, doesn't the Tokanemu active, for example, dispel granted effects? And isn't barrier a granted effect, meaning it should get dispelled, right? It doesn't. People have tested this. This does not get dispelled by Tokanemu. It's not dispellable. Also, people have asked, how does this compare to healing? Healing is terrible against barrier compared to barrier. Barrier is always, like, absorbing damage before it happens is always way better than healing. Not just because you get to keep full HP or critical HP, whatever you want to have during the entire time. You also don't even run the risk of dying as much. Like, it's easier to kill a unit that just has heal, but than it is to kill a unit that has a lot of barrier on it, right? It keeps you alive for longer, gives you more turns with that unit before they die, which is way better. It's proactive instead of reactive, which is always better. But there's something to notice in this when we're talking about healing versus barrier. If you're playing Yukika with this strategy, don't use her Magi or double because it heals her above the HP threshold. Nice. Something else to note is if you are playing in PvP in mirrors. Okay, let's say for example, half a year from now we have a unit that gives everyone passively on the enemy turn, not even just on their turn, like passively when the battle starts, 5,000 Baron everyone. If you should probably, if you're a featured player, dodge those teams in mirrors, because on defense, if the enemy has barrier and the enemy might have something like Junk House on their units, or just religiously MX for some of those units on their units, some of those Memoria on the units, you suddenly might notice that you can't kill your enemies before they kill you. So this makes mirrors a lot more dangerous for free-to-play characters, or maybe not free-to-play, like new accounts. I mean, I'm free-to-play and I one-shot enemies that have like 40,000 defense easily because I have Mock You. But just fresh accounts, like fresh accounts probably have to dodge a lot more characters in mirrors, because barrier might actually completely screw up fresh accounts in mirrors. Now, some negatives. Now, because barrier doesn't stack, if you have multiple sources of barrier, they kind of get lost and they kind of become useless. So you always have to worry about when do you actually use your barrier and when is it better to not use your barrier. And because it can't stack, there's always a maximum of how much barrier can have at any given point, which means you can't keep pushing it, okay? Now, also, if we talk about the unit itself, like I already mentioned this, but Momoko Mitama, giving it to just yourself is not that amazing. It's a lot better to give it to everyone so that everyone can get the effect from this. So just having it on one unit is also not that amazing. So Momoko Mitama are not going to be the unit to make it work. What else do we have? Of course, if an enemy hit is really strong, like a single target Magia, or a really strong AoE or Magia Doppel, like Magia or Doppel, that would also completely destroy you as well. Even a barrier won't protect you from that at all. Like some Magias or Doppel in mirrors hit for like 500,000 damage. Even if you're at max HP, having something like Junk House on with a like 10,000 HP barrier, you're still gonna die really hard from this, right? It's not gonna protect you from that. It's more so that until then, those units are gonna be safe, okay? What else is that? So if you are on the defense, it also kind of depends. If you're on the defense side in mirrors, right? There kind of has to be an effect that is passive, that like triggers when the battle starts. Because if it has to be an SE active, of course, SE actives only trigger when you get a turn. So in mirrors, when you're on defense, the attacker gets their first turn and probably kills the guy that has barrier before they even get a turn to activate it on their turn. So that's at least some counterplay in case this is only something that is being used as an SE active. But yeah, if it is being used passively, there is going to be some use on this. And also something to notice, I brought up earlier, damage over time effects. Damage over time effects like burn, like curse, like poison, they will still hit your normal HP, which will still fucking hurt and bring down the full HP bonus, right? So you might have something like Junk House, and then the enemy poisons you, and poison does 5% of max HP damage, which means that the regenerate will actually not help enough. Actually, the regenerate happens first and then you take damage. So even if you had like 2000 HP percent, 2000% regenerate HP, like guaranteed full HP pang, you would take the poison damage after the regenerate and not be at full HP. So something like poison, burn, curse will completely ruin this strategy as well. But if you're playing yourself on attacker in mirrors, like if you're the attackers in mirrors, you're not going to be poisoned on turn 1, right? You can't be poisoned on turn 1 because it's your first turn. You always get first turn. So at least you're guaranteed that. And even then, you might have stealth aim resistance. If you have a Mundo community team, for example, the enemy might not even have damage over time effects. They might use it only on 1 or 2 characters when you have like 5 characters with that. So it's still not completely going to screw you over if the enemy has like 1 or 2 people that have damage over time, stealth aimants on them. You're going to be fine, probably still. So what does this actually mean now? Now that we have seen everything that this amazing barrier can do for us, all the effects that we can get from it, all the positives and downsides from it that you could actually that you would have to deal with barrier. Also, by the way, something you notice, if you get stunned, some people have asked this, I don't know why people ask this. If you are stunned, for example, barrier still works. I think people have asked this because Endure and Survive doesn't work if you're stunned, but that's kind of like a pseudo-active ability that you have to be conscious for. Barrier isn't like that. Anyway, now we've seen all of that, what does it actually mean for the meta? Why is this maybe so meta-defining? So if we talk about Kimochi, On Kimochi, Memoria like Sword aren't being played. Why? Because you have to fight for 6 turns and you're probably gonna lose the effect from Sword after turn 1, after which it kind of doesn't do that much anymore. But if you have Barrier on everyone immediately, Kimochi don't hit that hard, especially if they're like the Kimochi that is, of course, the element that hits weak against what you're probably gonna be fielding. Just a little bit of a barrier is going to be able to keep all your units at max HP, and because all units are going to be at max HP for not just 1 turn, maybe 5 turns, maybe 6 turns, the entire battle, suddenly the barrier itself in conjunction with Sword might become really goddamn important. This now might suddenly become the most important Memoria, together with this, of course, in Kimochi after this, if you can guarantee that everyone just stays at full HP the entire time, which is kind of absurd if that's actually the case. So Barrier on everyone might completely break, not completely break, but might evolve Kimochi meta to make more use of Sword Memoria, like any of these 2 Memoria, and that might at least already be an impact for that. Secondly, when it comes to Mirror, so like I said already on defense, some fresh accounts that don't have many strong Memoria might have to dodge some characters that they see that have this barrier on everyone passively in Mirrors, or else they get completely shreked. But in general, if you're talking about how you can use that during your attack phase, if you're playing a ranked Mirrors, for example, and you think to yourself, how can I make use of Barrier? Even if you just have it as an SE active on everyone, so basically just like Momoko Mitama's active, but on everyone, how would you make use of that? Well, once again, you would probably use something like Sword, you would probably use something like Junk House on everyone, so that you do your first turn, you have all the stuff that you do on turn 1, your Nagisa does her active, your Sudachi whatever active, but because everyone is barriered, your HP doesn't drop. Your HP probably is going to be at full HP even after the first turn, right? You're just not going to take any damage, which already gives you more points, because you get more points in Mirrors the higher HP your units are. And then on turn 2, maybe you're still not going to take any damage. Maybe the barrier still holds because all your units have so much attack, defense, but at the same time having so goddamn much attack, like your stats just inflate really high. And if the barrier is strong enough and your units have enough defense, they'll just stick around a lot longer, meaning that in Mirrors, you will most definitely use a unit that gives barrier to everyone so that you can make use of these Memoria. And that is why in both Kimochi and in ranked Mirrors and tournament Mirrors, especially tournament Mirrors, barrier might become really important to make use of these max HP Memoria that now suddenly are really important again. And this was a really long video, but I want to make sure that I go really in depth with everything. So if people ask me in the future about barrier, I can just link them this video, and they're probably not going to watch it because it's a 28-minute video. Who the fuck has time for a 28-minute video? But yeah, that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Subscribe, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next time.